everyone. Welcome to another wonderful Academy from, of course, our Aquarium of the Pacific here in Long Beach. My name is Jen, and I'm really excited to be sharing this program. It's the first day that we're actually doing it, so it's very exciting. Today we're going to be discussing life cycles. And what's really amazing is that in the ocean, there are so many different life cycles. And I'm really excited to share and explore some of these life cycles alongside with you. We're going to start with some of the familiar and some of the unfamiliar as we go on ahead and talk about life cycles today. If you do have any questions, please feel free to go on ahead and text us below right down there with our number 562-286-1838. And if it is past 2 o'clock on or 2:30 on today, Friday, feel free to go on ahead and email us. Email also down below, live@lbaop.org. So, if we think about life cycles, I have Shark Lagoon up here, and we always like to start out with a different kind of webcam. One, because they're really relaxing, but two, they're really fun. And there's a particular reason why I went ahead and chose Shark Lagoon today, and that is because we have one of the egg cases from Shark Lagoon, right? Now, this egg case is from one of our zebra sharks that I currently don't see around at the moment. Go figure. But they are definitely around. They're the ones with the spots, of course, not the stripes, the spots. When they are babies, they do have those stripes. But our goal today is to talk a little bit about, well, how do they go from, maybe an egg all the way up to an adult? So when you think about the word life cycle, what comes to mind? Is it a definition of what a life cycle is? Is there a certain animal that you're like, oh, I totally know the life cycle of a frog? What kind of comes to mind? For me, sharks is definitely one of them, but also jellies too. So all of these animals have a wide variety of ways in which they try to make sure that their next generation succeeds. And so our goal today is to look into some of these life cycles and to be able to understand why these life cycles are important. Many of these life cycles do have different stages, and so we're going to be looking into some of those different stages today and kind of getting a better feel for how many stages within the life cycle of an animal there might be, right? Some of them are really simple, and some of them are a lot more complex. So if we think about the definition of a life cycle, what do you think that might be? Different stages of an animal's life, perhaps? Absolutely, right? So these animals, some of them transform a lot. Some of them transform a little. And we have our first question, Gage. So wonderful. Thanks for joining us on one of our new programs today. Do crabs have a life cycle? They absolutely do. Before I delve a little bit deeper into that, why don't we go on ahead and talk about two different types of life cycles. So we have, like I mentioned earlier, simple versus complex, all right? Now, crabs have a complex life cycle, but let's go over a simple life cycle to begin with. All right, looks like we have a fish that's really enjoying our camera right there. We're not talking about you right now, fish, but what we are going to be talking about is one of our favorite animals here at the aquarium that we find so adorable, and that would be of our seals. So seals have a very simple life cycle where when the mom gives birth, guess what? Well, basically, a miniature version of that seal pops out, right? So anytime that it just basically looks like a miniature version of the adult, that is a simple life cycle. And so here at the aquarium, I think Kaya now is 2 years old, right? I think thereabouts, or is she 3 now? 2 or 3 years old. It's been a while. It's amazing how quick they grow up. But here you can go on ahead. I'm going to step out of the screen so you can enjoy all this cuteness that we see right here. But here we have Shelby, the mama, and Kaya, the baby pup right here, right? And this was a little bit right after she was born. So this isn't after like months of development outside of the mom or anything like that. This was just a little bit right after she was born. As a matter of fact, this is we're showing it as a picture, but this is part of a video where we're watching Kaya and Shelby and their interactions together. And some of those interactions will actually show where her umbilical cord is still attached. So definitely a brand new pup right out of mama right here. And it's incredible to see. I mean, I wouldn't have guessed that this is, a really super new young animal, but it is. So we can see here, right, a miniature version of mama right here. Coloration is a little bit different. Why do you think that might be? Sorry, poor grammar there. Well, do you notice what our little pup here is blending into? The sand, right? And so these animals, when they are young, they blend into their surroundings because they aren't quite as capable right away as mama might be. And so mama might need to help grab some food, help to teach her some ways to be able to, survive as an actual seal. But aside from that, when this little one grows, her color is going to change into a little bit darker like her mom right there. But that's it. It's a pretty simple life cycle, right? All right, so Gage, we aren't necessarily going to get into crabs specifically today, though don't you worry, I'm sure we will be getting into a crab life cycle later on. They have many different stages within their life cycle though. Some of them where they start out really teeny tiny from eggs and they float around in the ocean. And then they go through several transformations and they can look very different. They're very pokey and pointy, as that is a good way to protect themselves and a good way just for them to be. They're almost clear. And then as they get older, they slowly transform and change shape into an actual crab and settle down into the very bottom. So they spend some of their life cycle, crabs do, up in the water column eating lots of little plant and animal plankton. And then they transform a few times and then they turn into something like this right back here, a full adult crab. Now, the beginning stages of a crab do not look anything like the end stage of our crab right here. So thanks, Gage, and hopefully we'll get a chance to maybe show what some of those little parts of that life cycle look like on a later show. So keep on tuning on in. Oh, and it looks like Kaya is too. Excellent. So thank you. Talia is actually joining me in the studio today. She's on question control, and Carrie is the one showing us all of these wonderful pictures behind me. So I feel very supported with a lovely team today. And yeah, so she was born on April 2018. Thank you, Talia, for that. Awesome. So they just grew up so fast, and 2, 3. I didn't even know my cats were 8. I thought they were still 4. They're forever kittens in my eyes. All right, folks. But kitten, right? Another example of a really simple life cycle. I mean, they're little teeny tiny mews, right? They're little teeny tiny kittens, but then they eventually practically look like an adult cat. But let's go ahead and start with a more familiar life cycle just to kind of get us warmed up today. Let's talk a little bit about frogs. All right, so that one kind of bends between, land and freshwater. There aren't really too many saltwater frogs out there. But let's see. Can you think of what the different stages are for a frog life cycle? I got adults, right? 2 adults go on ahead and they make an egg. From there, where does it go? If you ever want to share different parts of your life cycle, not your life cycle, of the frog's life cycle, ours are pretty much simple life cycles, though it doesn't seem simple, does it, as a human? But if you want to share any thoughts on life cycles, feel free to go on ahead and text it on in. But let's see. If I had to think of a frog life cycle, I might think egg, tadpole, frog, right? Now, some people might say, hold on a minute, there's a froglet stage, right? So that's definitely a possibility too. Depends on sometimes who you talk to. But here we have our adult frog, right? Then we have our eggs. Then we have our tadpole. And our tadpole eventually transforms a little bit into a frog, right? Froglet stage is a little kind of in between tadpole and adult frog, where they have a little bit more of a tail on them, like about that much more. But they practically look like an adult frog, hence froglet, right? But here we have all the different stages of our frog life cycle. And, well, let's go on ahead and delve a little bit deeper. If we think about these eggs, any thoughts to where these frogs, these freshwater frogs, would lay their eggs? Do you think they just lay them on top of the water, in the water? Do you think it's on land? Well, if you're thinking, maybe, here's a great picture, thanks, Carrie, of some frog eggs. Here are some examples. So what do you notice that it might be tucked into or around? Oh, I definitely see green back there. So it's definitely kind of tucked into a plant or a leaf. And many times these eggs will be, they could be in a pond, but they could also be on kind of like in a little puddle. Yep, even a puddle. So frogs can be quite advantageous and they can go on ahead and lay in any kind of body of water that they can find near them, minus the ocean, that is. But all of these bodies of water allow these eggs to stay nice and moist and wet, which is really key because frogs in general have really thin membranes that interact between the air surface and the water. So they're almost like little sponges where they're constantly getting air from their skin and constantly getting the nutrients from the water, right? And so these are some of these teeny tiny eggs. Now, as they go on ahead and mature, what do they turn into? A tadpole, right? Now, what do these tadpoles eat? Let's see. They are really small, right? They're pretty tiny. They seem to have kind of a long wispy tail, right? Do they have all of their front and back legs yet? Not when they first hatch out of an egg. They do have a mouth, that helps them to eat. But believe it or not, oh, there's a froglet picture right down there, right? Believe it or not, even before they get their legs over here, if we can imagine just with almost look like a little miniature fish, right? They are eating a lot of, well, plants. Yep, mainly plants. They start primarily as vegetarians, and they eat a lot of algae that lives up and around these ponds, and they also go on ahead and get a chance to wiggle around and move around. So they spend a lot of their time in water. So a special feature or adaptation that they have, a way that they survive in those very first stages of life, are by having gills on the outside. Yep, they have gills on the outside. How do you think gills on the outside help them out? Because why aren't they inside? Well, if you're thinking, well, gills on the outside might help them to breathe better, absolutely, right? These are brand newborn frogs. And so they don't have, a really like hardcore complex way to be able to move a lot of that oxygen around. And having them on the outside is really helpful for that. After all, as an adult frog, do they have gills? Nope, they have lungs, right? So as our frog slowly develops, it goes from that little tadpole all the way to a more developed tadpole that we have here, right? And with this more developed tadpole, do you think it still eats algae? It sure does. But not only does it go on ahead and eat algae, it also starts to eat some insects that are living in the water. Now, if you happen to be familiar with some of those insects that these frogs love to eat, go on ahead and send that text on in to 562-286-1838. But any kind of, if you are curious to see what kind of bugs are eaten by a lot of these frogs, you can go on ahead and head on over to a stream, take like a little kind of like aquarium fishing net with you, and you can swoop the very top. And all of those little insects that you see right up at the top are the ones that many of these frogs eat. So these little frogs, when they're a super duper small tadpole, they help control the algae that's found in a lot of these freshwater places. And as they get older, not only do they continue to eat the algae, they also eat dead leaves that kind of fall down from the trees. And on top of that, they also eat insects, baby insects that are in the water. What a cool service that these frogs provide, that they're able to really kind of, help maintain that entire really teeny tiny microscopic ecosystem, right? That little mini neighborhood that they live in. So it's pretty cool about these frogs right here. And of course, here we have our froglet. Do you think our froglet has gills anymore? Not so much. And as a matter of fact, this is when a frog is about 12 weeks old. Okay, so about 6 to 9 weeks is when they have those gills and they start having these hind legs. And then at 12 weeks, this is the size that they get right here. Now here, they're able to have lungs now. They don't have any more of those gills, which allows them Well, lots more freedom, right? Now they can act more like an adult frog where they can go on ahead and leap around, eat a more diverse or variety in their diet, right? So not only now do they stick with maybe algae or dead leaves that fall into the ground, or maybe insects that are just right up at the top, they can go on ahead and hop around and eat a lot of different things. Cool. Well, hopefully some of that sounded a little bit familiar, because that is just kind of one of the life cycles that we were interested in highlighting here. Now, here at the aquarium, why are we talking about frogs? And that's because actually have an exhibit for frogs. We're not for well, they are for frogs, but you're not going to see frogs buying admission to the aquarium and checking their neighbors out. But we do have a wide variety of frogs here at the aquarium because they're very important animals. Here at the aquarium, here's a cute adult frog, right? We have a lot of ocean animals, and the ocean's great. Don't get me wrong. But the ocean health is not just, you care about the ocean animals and nothing else. Nothing impacts the ocean, right? A lot of things and processes that happen on land, that affects the ocean. So anything like, if a forest gets chopped down, all of that extra leaf litter, all of that extra dirt, all of that eventually gets washed out into the ocean, right? Anytime that we might accidentally litter, right? All of that rains and it goes down into rivers and out into the ocean too. So the land and the ocean are very much tied together. And so we are really big believers here of understanding and really getting appreciation about these land creatures. As a matter of fact, not only do we have frogs on exhibit, but we also have animals in a barn. Yeah, we have a barn here at the aquarium. Now we have our special land animals that you may have seen some fun little episodes on either our YouTube page or maybe through our Facebook page. But we showcase some fun animals like our opossum, our Virginia opossum. We also have some really neat birds like our sulfur-crested cockatiel, Lola, that you might be familiar with. And so we're really strong believers in understanding how land animals and ocean animals, in a way, work together. Same thing for our lorikeets. All right, so with these frogs right here, they are a great indicator of environment health, right? So once again, they have really sensitive skin, and so that sensitive skin really, if the water isn't very healthy, right, these animals are the ones that can get sick. So it's very important that we keep our water healthy so that way our frogs can stay happy and healthy too. All right, so we're going to go on ahead and focus a little bit more on an ocean animal, as many of us are partial to ocean animals. And so let's go on ahead and look at one of my favorites, jellies. And with these jellies, their life cycle has a few more stages than our frog life cycle. And we're going to be focusing on the moon jelly life cycle as we can touch moon jellies here at the aquarium. Now, moon jellies, like we have right here, their life cycle is pretty much, it's a good life cycle to kind of go by because many jellies have similar life cycles to our adult moon jellies right here. Now, there actually is a way that you can kind of tell the difference between male and female jellies. One way of doing that is by looking at the oral arms. So the little parts that you're seeing that are drifting right down here. All right. It's not the little frills. Those are the tentacles. But all of these parts right here are their oral arms. For females, those oral arms generally are a little bit more frilly. The males are a little bit more straight. And so that's the way that you could pretty much tell the difference. Now, what ends up happening are these jellies are actually brooders, meaning that they'll go on ahead and hold on to the eggs until they're fertilized. Pretty wild, right? But the craziness does not end there. Carrie, if you wouldn't mind, but yep, you read my mind. So here we have their life cycle. A little bit more complicated than the frogs ones, huh? But we're going to go on ahead and highlight some of the different ways in which each part actually is super beneficial for these animals, right? So here we have, oh, nice and frilly. So this is probably our female right here. And it holds onto an egg, and that leg turns into a planula larva, right? Basically, the size of this fun friend is about the size of a pencil dot. Yep. So if you're at home or you have a pen, make a dot, that's the size of the planula. It's super tiny. But from there, that little magical dot finds something hard to land on. Maybe it's a rock. Maybe it's the side of a ship. Maybe it's here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, right? But it goes on ahead and it finds something hard and it transforms into something that looks very similar to a sea anemone here. And from here, it can do one of two different things, right? It all depends on what the ocean is like. Yeah, you're like, well, the ocean's cold, it's dark, but it has cool things in it. But for these animals here, at this part of their life cycle, they are taking note of, is there a lot of food in the water? What's the temperature like? And from those different kinds of cues, and there's more cues too, they can figure out, hey, do I want to clone myself? Yep, they can actually split in half and, well, they leave a little bit of their foot and they provide 2 new of these polyps right here. And they can just create a miniature army of themselves, all clones, which is pretty incredible. But if maybe conditions are making them a little nervous, let's just say the water temperature is warm or there's not a lot of food that's going on, being at this stage, just stuck onto the ground or onto a hard rock, isn't really beneficial, right? And so what they end up doing is cloning themselves. It looks a little bit like this right here. Now you're like, that kind of looks like a weird stack of pancakes, Jen. And you aren't wrong. It kind of does. But with this here, they are cloning themselves vertically or upwards like this. So it's like a tower of small jellies. And they are all ready to be able to pop off individually. So each one of these is an individual jelly. And they will all get sent out into the water to maybe find a better place to be. So like, oh no, temperatures aren't being great. Maybe my food source isn't so great. Let's go on ahead and clone ourselves like this, and let's send everyone out so maybe they might have a more successful future. And so each one of these pop off, and they turn into an ephyra, or a baby jelly right here. And eventually, they grow up to be the adults right here. Now, lucky for us here at the aquarium, we do grow our own moon jellies. Yeah, so a lot of the ones that you end up touching are ones that we have here. We even have a window to display and show what some of these different parts of the life cycle look like. And so it's really cool. Now, unfortunately, our indoor portions of our aquarium are currently closed, but I do believe we might have a picture or potentially a video, I'm not sure which one, of these jellies. But it's really cool to be able to see. Now, many of these stages of these jellies are really quite tiny, so they're about this big. Maybe if we're lucky, we can see it about this tall, but they are really small. And as a matter of fact, if you just happen to look at them, it would look like fuzz. Yep, so they don't really look very large, and they start out and they stay super teeny tiny. So even though those polyps, where they could clone and make more of themselves, right, those are super duper small. It's hard to see with your eye, though you can if you look really super close. And all of those stages are small, well, for what reason? If you're thinking maybe it's so that way they aren't seen, yeah, for sure, right? And so they're staying nice and small, one, so they don't have to put a whole lot of energy into growing, but two, it also allows them to pretty much kind of be under the radar, right? It's really small. Maybe no one will notice if they're underneath a rock or growing anywhere on the side. So these jellies are pretty incredible animals. All right, so now our jellies had a lot of different stages. If we think about our frog life cycle, we had adults, egg, tadpole, froglet, and that's pretty much it, right? So we had 4 different life cycle stages. Now for our jellies, we have adult, egg. Here we go. Thanks, Carrie. So here we can see some of these polyps, right? So we had adult, egg, larva, because that's the little pencil dot that we're seeing. And then we have these ones, we're called polyps right here. So like I said, they kind of look like fuzz, right? And this is us like really magnifying on it. And so here we have all of these polyps. And then remember about that pancake stage where we have all those little pancakes? That's what we're seeing right here. And it's also what we're seeing right here. Now I was about to say, hey, let's count how many we have, but there's a lot, right? So there's a whole bunch of these on here. And each one, this one's actually almost ready. This one will pop off, right? And then turn into that ephyra or that baby jelly. So let's see. Egg, planula, polyp, This is actually called a strobulating polyp, but still a polyp. And we have Ephyra. So that's at least 5 or maybe 6 different stages inside of their life cycle. So that's a lot of different stages just for one animal. But all of these different stages serve a different purpose depending upon what the condition of the ocean is like, right? What is better? Is it better to make lots and lots more of all of these polyps and live it up and grow your little jelly army, right? Or are you worried and you're like, oh no, all right, jelly army, time to, make all of these little jellies and pop off, right? And actually, that's probably the reason why we have so many jellies sometimes all at once. Is because ocean conditions will be just right for jellies to be like, all right, let's repopulate. And they will clone themselves like that. And could you imagine all of these just stacked with all of these jellies right here and all popping off to make baby jellies? I mean, that's a ton of jellies, right? That's a huge smack of jellies. And sometimes that happens out in the wild. When our populations and our water quality, it might be kind of out of sorts and it's not balanced, we could get a whole bunch of these jellies right here. In fact, sometimes there have been so many jellies that fisher folk that send out their net to catch fish, when they bring their haul back onto their boat, that net, instead of being full of fish, ends up being full of jellies. Yep, that's how crazy it can be in some places around the world, right? When our ecosystem, right, when our habitats and our ocean quality is all kind of out of balance. Now, Malia is asking, do all things have a life cycle? That's a really good question. Yeah, they do, right? Even if it's as simple as baby, that looks just like an adult, for sure, right? Some of them are more complicated than others, and sometimes the adults spend more time taking care and training the babies. Sometimes those adults don't train those babies at all. And this is what's really cool about our life cycle class. And maybe in future classes, we can talk more about different life cycles because there's so many out there and there's so many ways that parents may or may not help their babies to grow. So if you're interested in learning more about life cycles, stay tuned for another class. We also have a really exciting class that we taught yesterday called, I think it was Baby Animals. So if you want to see some really cute baby pictures, but also, get a different peek into life cycles, I think that one focused so far on simple life cycles. So seeing how, the babies and the adults are very similar, look very similar to each other. That's another class to see as well. So unfortunately, are all out of time. Hopefully now you have a better idea of how the different stages of the life cycle really benefit the animal and how those different stages of those life cycles not only benefit the animal, but benefit the environment and the food web that surrounds it. So thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate your participation and your questions. This is the last program for this week, but not to fret, we'll be coming back next week with more exciting content. If you do have any further that you'd like to share with us, we'd be happy to answer them through our email at live@lbaop.org. But otherwise, have a great weekend, everyone, and stay safe out there. Take care.